A lot of stuff going on with the bacon was awesome, some technical difficulties. We got a good team. We make it work. Can we give each other a round of applause? We're proud of you guys. It's a good group of people here. Real quick, a couple little announcements for me too. Next Sunday, we want to kind of, we're gearing down with the series that we're in. We're talking about taking a step of faith, and so one small step is the series. And what we want to do next week is just challenge you guys to share a story about how you've shared your faith. A couple minutes, I just want a good 6 or 8 of us to share what God has done in our life, to share a story about what we've learned, about maybe where it's worked or where it hasn't. Maybe even some stories of people that haven't come around yet, where we failed. But we're in this together, and so next week, I really would need your help. I'm going to ask a couple of you more after service. Specifically, I just would love to challenge you to share. We've done it before. It's a great way to kind of grow together on taking the steps of faith that God called us to take. I believe that we're supposed to be missionaries more than members. That's kind of a theme in this series, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit today. But I got to kind of back up on 2 things real quick. Again, don't forget those bottles if you didn't get a chance to bring it. But I feel like we could pray and go home after Rick's communion. Like,
amen.
Holy. Good, yeah. I try to keep it together back there. I feel like, brother, just know that we're not measured by where we start, but where we end.
Amen.
And you keep doing your thing, and I'm honored to do it with you. And I think we can leave a legacy for our kids, and I want to do that with you. That's what we're going to talk about today. I heard this crazy analogy where there's this professional soccer coach, and he had coached adult women and males, and kind of had some observations about how this works. And so whenever he was coaching the women, he would get down on a knee and kind of talk at them at that level. And with the men, he would have them get down on one knee. And he did this because it seems like he learned as a coach that women, they need to feel trusted when you're speaking to them, for them to understand where the coach is going with what he wants the team to do. But for the men, they need to feel threatened for them to pay attention to what he's going to say. He also noticed that for the women, if he would just give instruction on what he wants the team to do, they would hear that and think, okay, he's clearly talking to me and I should apply myself to it. But he learned with the men, he had to call them out by name, or else they didn't think they were talking to him anyway. And so I say all that to say, gentlemen, at least as we get started this morning, I am talking to you. Guys, I want to talk about what it means to be a father that God has for us to be. And this is very important to me because I'm right in the middle of it too. And if you know me, anytime I prepare a message, I've got to think about where I'm at with it. And so with 4 kids running around, I think about being a dad quite a bit. And so this is as much for me as it is for you. But gentlemen, I'm calling you out. I want to talk about where we're at and what we do to be the fathers that God called and created us to be. Because I think of the steps of faith that we take, this is awful important. I didn't set up the map because I forget, and today was a busy day, but we've been working on this series talking about being a missionary versus a member of a church, and what would it look like to think about Hernando County that way. And so on this map, and I'll have it up again next week, but I remember that I know for me, and I challenge with you, that I have 2 spots on the map. The way this worked is that I wanted everyone to think of a mission field. They're a missionary. What's a step they could take towards that mission field? And so there's a lot of options, and I hope you've prayed about where you could be involved as a missionary in the county that you live in. But I knew that before we get too carried away with where the spots are at, that we would be missionaries, that we needed 2 stickers. That's because my son Jude came up with me, and we put a sticker on our house. And I thought that was kind of silly at first, but I realized, no, I would be a fool to assume that my home is not my first mission field. And so, gentlemen, I want to talk about how you would take a step towards that mission field first. Because he's called us into that to be a specific thing and do specific things. You saw some great little clips, and you've heard some things about what that looks like, and I really don't want to miss that. And so for Father's Day, how can we be the best that we possibly can be? A sermon that has stuck with me for years, and I've heard it in a bunch of different ways, and I just kind of want to share with you the premise. Most of us know the story of Adam and Eve and kind of how things got started and where they made some mistakes. The part that catches me is not so much the idea of, okay, well, we know the serpent was in the garden and Eve was tempted, and so you've heard many preachers say, well, there's a really, really good chance that Adam was there the whole time, and so for whatever reason, he chose not to engage, and that is an interesting idea, and I want to kind of hang out with that thought for just a moment. is that I think there's a lot to that moment. I think if Adam chose to not engage, who knows what was all happening in his mind, but I think I can see a couple different things. I think sometimes for men, when there's something they don't fully understand or they might be afraid of, it's easier to get on the defense and just wait and see what's going to happen. And so I think for the longest time, I would say the first sin of mankind that ruined us was our pride. And I still think there's a lot of truth to that. What I noticed in him, and this word scares me to death, and be careful, I think Adam was being very passive. I think he watched to see what would happen, and kind of when consequences came, what did he do? He wanted to blame Eve for the situation. And so if he was in that place, the sin that I see in Adam that challenged me a whole lot was his decision to step back. And his passive nature in that moment to say, well, we'll just see what happens. When his wife is being tempted and plot to have destruction come to her from the serpent, that he wouldn't step in and respond to that. Like, that gets me kind of fired up. I was hanging out with some friends in my small group. We meet on Thursday nights at Panera on 50, and I felt bad. I apologized to my guys because we were talking together and sharing, and I got distracted by a family to the left of me. People watching, sometimes I get kind of caught up in other people. But I was watching because it was interesting to me, because it was a family of 6, which I can relate to, and I saw the mom and the 4 kids, and I saw the dad. But I kept looking because I couldn't tell if the dad was a stranger or if he was part of the family. Because he was kind of on the outside, and you could tell he just got back from work, and he was on his phone. And it could have been that he just happened to sit at the table next to this family, because the whole group of kids were all about mom, and everyone was talking with mom, and they were having their conversation, and he was definitely over here. And so it could have been that he just happened to sit close to this family. So I was kind of watching. And they did kind of get up and lead together, and so I assumed that must be their father. And again, we were supposed to have dialogue in our small group, but I was overwhelmed by that image. God forbid I would ever be the kind of dad where that I'm so removed from them, I can see from a distance my family living life without me attached to it. And I don't want to lead like that. I don't want to be a dad like that. So being passive, that gets my attention. And sometimes we can do that because, and I hate this quote. Someone said, men will usually step forward when they are sure of their success and confident of their strength. But if they're not, then if I can't assure that I'm going to be successful, I am very hesitant to take the step. And so I could just be defensive or passive and kind of wait and see what's going to happen first. And that breaks my heart because I know that the sticker on the map, I know that my home and my kids, I can't be passive in that role. I mean, I have reason to. I have days where I'm overwhelmed. It would be easier to just kind of step back and hide. And I don't think that's what God would have us to do, to be the kind of men that God called us to. And so be careful of being passive. And here's the thing. Unfortunately, the enemy that we all have is not stupid. And he knows this about you, men. He knows that, and I said it from this stage, or maybe from the floor or wherever I was at, but I said, one of my biggest issues in life is my couch. And for whatever reason, it would be easier for me to just, I had a long day or whatever justification I have for wanting to sit back, and so I'll just sit on my couch and I can live there. I feel like there's hours that go by and I'm like, what am I doing right now? And then I kind of start thinking about how we have our lazy boys, and now that's kind of something that's very special to me. You don't see the lazy girl, like they never came out with that. It just doesn't work like that. And so be careful, guys. What we get identified by needing that manly spot to sit back. That's how we would identify ourselves. And then here's what gets me the most, is that when we are sitting back on our lazy boy, what is the kind of things that we're doing with our time? We're usually watching a sports game or some kind of action-packed movie, or we're seeing other men live out their potential. What does that say? I'm super uncomfortable with it. At the end of the day, I know it's easier for me to sit on that couch because the Lord knows it's comfy. But is that really the kind of dad I want to be? And so I'm very careful of how passive I can be, how set back I can be in my ways. And so I want to challenge us to think about what it means to take a step, a small step even, towards being the man that God called us to be. And because the enemy knows that about us, that we have a tendency to find comfort in the couch, he calls that out in us. Because if I'm the enemy, it seems like the best strategy he could have is to keep the men quiet and secluded in a corner, not doing and living the life they could live. I'm going to keep them insecure. I'm going to keep them overwhelmed by guilt, so broken by their choices that they don't think they have a role to play. I'm going to make them feel so weak that unless they see success, and I'll hide it far from them, that I'm going to keep them right where they are. I don't need to damage them physically. I don't need to hurt. I can do that. And he would say, the enemy, I see this all the time. If I can destroy the father, I will have a huge hole in the family to get in there and cause a lot of problems. The enemy, unfortunately, is not stupid and knows the strategies to defeat the families that God created and designed to do beautiful things is to attack the men. And so I got to be careful. You, gentlemen, have to be careful of the plot of the evil one. He would keep you hidden. He would keep you overwhelmed by your guilt, and you're thinking that you're not good enough to be the man that God died for you to be. And so we've got to come against that and make decisions on what that looks like, because I know the scripture also says very clearly that we, gentlemen, are held responsible for our families. Like, sleep good at night with that one. So what happens with our kids, some of that comes on us. I'll be honest with you. I don't completely understand what that means. I just know that it scares me a little bit. I know that he says in me and you and I that there is responsibility to not be passive, but to move forward and engage my kids, my family, with as much Jesus as I can bring to them. And in that is the problem. Because if I just want to show them an angry male, then I can do that all day. But if I want to show them Jesus, I got to work at it. I've got to make some decisions on how different I'm going to be. And so there's this example, and thank God for it. Because if it wasn't for what this good Father and this illustration we get through Jesus and the Father God, that would change everything. And so I'm so grateful that we have that. So men, maybe one of the steps I want to challenge you with, and I see this from Jesus, and he shows us that one of the best things we could do to change the world is through love. And now here's the thing. Specifically, we see kind of some descriptions of what love is. I was convicted by this list. You guys maybe know this from 1 Corinthians, that love is patient, love is kind. And even just stopping with those first two words, would I describe those two words to describe myself as a dad? Do I embody that as best as I could with my first mission field? Because I think Jesus would have me be as loving as I possibly can be to my wife and my kids, and loving seems to be patient, and I struggle. Being loving seems to be kind, be gentle, and full of self-control. I got work to do. But that mission field, that comes first. Because I don't want to be, again, I don't know the guy's name, and maybe I was missing part of his story, but there's this gentleman that I saw in Panera, and I pray, God, please don't ever. It breaks my heart. And you know what? You've seen it too. You've seen the families torn apart by men that just don't want to engage. Now, a lot of the time as a youth minister, I remember seeing literally the family where the dad was physically removed, whether that's because of different life choices or because of danger or some kind of issue. But I've also seen the one that kind of surprised me, where I still see dads that are present in the picture, but they couldn't care less about who's in their home. And I don't got to tell you what kind of impact a passive father can have on a family. I'm sure if we had time for it, you could share some stories about what you've seen that's good about your dad and some things that you wish were a little bit different. And someday my kids are going to be sitting there too, and they're going to have some stories. And what are they going to say about their dad? What does that mean? Because God made it so to where I would be who I'm supposed to be for my kids, and I can't let that go. And again, that couch is comfortable. And it would be easy for me to sit back and watch and kind of choose when I want to engage. But he's called us to do things. He's given us great responsibility and believes in everything that you are. The enemy wants to keep you silent, but the Lord has given you promise to invest in your family. And they will be better because of you. Your good and your bad, your honesty when it comes through, and being the dad that you are, and for all the good and the bad that you are, that changes people. And I want to not ever move past that. I don't remember and keep that tension. And gentlemen, just know that we have great responsibility. And I care a lot about at this church that we would keep each other accountable with that. That we have some phenomenal men in this room that I'm so honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with. Some guys that I know that if I confess my sin to, that I'm going to have some peace. I'm going to have some conflict as well. I'm going to have some people call me out because they love my kids too. I'm going to have some people tell me what I need to do to fix some things because I'm not very good by myself. And man, I got some people in this room, if I am hanging my head low, they will help me out. But I know I cannot do this by myself. And so I need other men to confess, to vent, to have that camaraderie, because that helps a whole lot. And so you have a mission field. I think that we could choose to be missionaries where we live, but don't miss that the first place to engage is with your families. Gentlemen, don't neglect what he gave you first, because you are ultimately responsible for that. And so remember that we're a work in progress, but our families are better because we're in the room. And don't sit back and watch, but engage. Specifically, how we engage is what I want to talk about. Now, this one is really for everybody, because I believe we are called to be engaged in what we're doing. It is kind of fitting that the name of this church is Go Church, that we would learn how to go, how to actively be and move and engage in the world that we're in. And so that is extremely important to me. And I'm okay with not always doing it right. I would rather get to the end of my life and know that I failed a lot versus just kind of sat back and watch other people try. Because here's the deal, that lazy boy, that illustration, if you will, that's kind of how life can go for a lot of people. We can do a lot of watching and critiquing how other people play the game and live their life, but you're in it as well. And you are in the game, in this thing called life, and God's given you things to do. So are you engaged? Are you off of the couch into the game of life that God has called you to live? Every single one of you has been given a calling from God to do some incredible things. Specifically, and this is what we're talking about this month, is to be a missionary where we live, because there was 2 stickers on the map. As much as I know it will make a difference if I disciple my family, I cannot sit back and think that's the only place that I need to invest. And I'll get honest with you, if your family isn't right, you need to pour that energy in there first. But I've heard it said, and this is huge for me, and you guys know who said this, but if it doesn't work at home, don't market it. And so I'm going to continue to make sure things are working at home. But when they are, and for a lot of you, thank the Lord, it is working at home. And you're doing great. And so that means you've got another step to take. And for a lot of reasons, you've got another step to take. You've got a step to take towards the mission field that is this county. And for a lot of different reasons. The first and kind of the easiest and the one that makes the most sense is because Jesus said you should. He said, go make disciples of all nations. He told every single one of you to do that. And so that's up to you how you respond. But being attached to this series, it matters a lot to what my kids see. I want to tell you a story. This is the text for today. I know we got into a lot of stuff, but if you would take your eyes to the screen, hopefully things work out. This is 2 slides out of, I think, 1 Corinthians, if I remember right. Indeed, Herod and Pontius Pilate met together with the Gentiles and the people of Israel in the city to conspire against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed. They did what they did what your power and will had decided beforehand, before it should happen. Now the Lord considered their threats and enabled your servants to speak your word with great boldness. Stretch out your hand to heal and perform signs and wonders through the name of your holy servant Jesus. Okay, Acts 4. Wow. You know what? Actually, Clinton, stay on that. Yeah, let me stay here, and then I'm going to have to jump back. But let's say this one. After they prayed, the place where they were meeting was shaken, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and spoke the word of God boldly. So go back to that second slide for me, bro, and just leave it on this one. This is a story out of Acts chapter 4. A lot of different things are happening here, but there's a couple key ideas I wanted to talk about in regards to how we engage as missionaries and why I think that's important. This series, we've been talking about steps and some of the things that get in the way for us that can be difficult is things like fear. And Stan did a phenomenal job talking about how you've got to deal with it, and here's some ways you can, and I think he did a great job facing his fears, literally being up on the stage. We talked about a little bit of courage first week, and today I want to talk about the boldness, and this boldness that we see in this passage. And again, the context of Acts, those first verses, the early Christians knew there was this thing called the Roman Empire that was a problem. But at the same time, they were trying to deal with how they should speak the gospel, because they knew they were supposed to obey Jesus, but there was this big enemy in their mind for a lot of them. And there was literally people trying to attack them. There was this persecution of early Christians. And so they're trying to figure out what best to do. And so they're praying, which we talked about how important that is the first week of the series. And so they said, now, Lord, consider the threats and enable your servants to speak words with great boldness. But they want to consider their threats. And I don't like that, but there's something very realistic about that. I want to pause just right there for a second. I might have told you this. A couple weeks back, end of the school year, I got to speak to the students at Western Anna Christian School. And they had two different chapels, and so I spoke with the younger kids and then the older kids. The younger kids, I had asked them if they ever wanted to be a missionary. And half the kids shot their hand up and they said they had wanted to do that, and I thought that was so cool. And so the older kids, I asked them, and so one little girl in the back kind of crept her hand up. And most kids, they want to raise their hand, and I said, what happened? And they all just kind of, and I said, I know half of you had wanted to do this before, and I saw some of the younger kids literally did raise their hand, and so what happened? We're talking about the same passage, and did you get scared? I think maybe they realized the world that they live in, and so something kind of switched. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what happens, but there's a lot of you that when you were a kid, you'd shoot your hand up for that too. Why? Because you weren't as afraid, because there was a boldness, because there was a trust. Because I remember when Jesus said, go make disciples, he ended with, and I will be with you always to the very end of the age. Like, what are you worried about? The threats are real. For the Christians in this time, they knew that they could face persecution that would include sometimes torture and death. And so they were aware of that. And you and I, we have very different threats, but there are issues with being bold. For whatever reason, all of us can maybe answer that a different way, but why aren't you bold for your faith? Like, why don't we share about Jesus? And I got to be careful, because when I say, why don't you, I'm sure some of you have some stories. In fact, I hope next week you would share those with the church, but we've got things that we struggle with this. And so I know for me, and so I'm assuming this with you, man, why am I not as bold as I could be about this? If I really know that Jesus is always going to be with me, like, what's stopping me? Well, sometimes those threats are what hold me back. And for them, it's very different. They have these outside threats, and I think for us, for me, it is those personal insecurities sometimes. I don't think I know what I'm talking about enough. It is I don't want to look stupid in front of different people. There's different reasons why we choose not to share it. I heard a stat, and I'm pretty sure this is wrong, and I definitely hope that it is. But the stat said that in America, only 2% of Christians have actually shared their faith with another person. 98% have never and will never share their faith. Again, I hope that's not true. But I understand that people are nervous about talking about it. And I understand that Jesus told us to do it. And so they have these threats, but then they pray that God would fill them with the great boldness to do that. We talked about prayer, and I just want you to remember that is the first thing you have to do, and it's important you would take that step. But here's the deal. This is important because this is the legacy that I want our kids to see in us. The generations to come after would know that we would choose that, because here's the deal. Where are our kids going to see great boldness in their faith if it's not from you and from me? They might find it in some other video or another preacher from another place, but why wouldn't we want them to see that in us? I want my kids to see bravery. I want them to see courage. I want them to see faithfulness. I want them to see that from their dad. And so this just isn't important because Jesus said he wants me to do it, but because I mean it when I say I want those kids of ours to go further than we do and love Jesus more than we ever could. And so if we want that for our kids, we have to be willing to go just as far, if not further, for the sake of the gospel. And if your motivation is so that your kids will see a legacy of faith, then that is good enough for me. And that's where I stand. And so as a father, I want to show my kids what it means to bravely walk into threats that I don't understand, to boldly proclaim the gospel that I know is true. I want them to see in their dad that I took the steps and I took the risk. And I'm okay if they and you see me fail because it means I tried it. And I want them to know that it's okay to fail in God's kingdom. Sometimes the perfectionist in me can keep me from walking out the door. And I don't want to do what I know the Lord called me to do. He called you to boldly proclaim your faith. And as we saw in this passage, there's prayers, there's the gift of the Holy Spirit, there's this great movement that happens as we take the steps of faith. Ladies and gentlemen, know that when you take the step, you are not alone in it. The Lord moves in you as you take those steps of boldness with your faith. I want to be a missionary in Hernando County. I don't know how to do it. I'm scared, but I'm going to take the step. You know why? Because I took a couple steps doing this church plant thing, and so far, so good. I've got no reason to doubt the Lord. If I would keep obeying one foot in front of the other, I don't know where I'm going to end up, but it's going to be much better than where I started. And so I want to do that because he told me to do it. But man, I got some extra motivation, and they're 4 beautiful children. Because I want them to see it. I want them to know that they're an example right in front of them of what it looked like to carry out their faith. And my favorite thing is, you know what? I don't have someone that did this before me. I wish I had my dad, who was an amazing missionary that changed the world. I wish I had that. That would make some things so much easier. But I'm okay with the fact that I have the perfect Father that showed me the way in ways that I can't imagine. I've got this person called Jesus that shows me how to be a man, how to be a father, and how to be a missionary. And I'm going to continue to do what he's called me to do. And so that is my guide, and I want to continue to follow him wherever he leads me. And as Paul had said as a missionary as well, I want people to follow me as I follow Jesus. And so you've got to consider the map, that you've got places at home to invest. And you've got to consider the place that you live, that you were made with a purpose to do amazing things. And I don't want you to miss that. And so what are the steps that you need to take? Maybe there's steps of kindness and patience and love at home in ways to really show your kids what it means to be a man of God and a mother and a woman of God. There's things that you can do for those people that ultimately matter very much to you. But even more so, I want my kids to see that I boldly stepped out and to take risks and take action and do things in my faith that I don't always know how to do. And I want them to see the bravery. I want them to see the faithfulness, because I'm tired of kind of watching to see what would happen. There is that passive part of me that says I can just sit on a couch and watch other pastors do it, and other men and other women step out in faith, but I don't want to be that guy, because I don't think Jesus wanted me to, and I don't think my kids want that example in their life. And so God has more in store for all of us. A famous missionary that I appreciate more and more, it seems, as time goes on. You maybe have heard of him. His name is Jim Elliot. And so there's this epic story of his faith, and traveled to a different place in the world, and it was ultimately killed for his willingness to share the gospel. But I'll never forget one of his famous quotes. And he said, "You are no fool to give up what you can't keep to gain what you can't lose. You are no fool to give up what you cannot keep to gain what you cannot lose." Because this is a legacy that we get to be a part of. I understand the comfort of the couch and the safety of the security of the defense and choosing to step back. But there are some things greater than that. I want to leave a legacy for our kids that changes our county. I want to be the kind of person, I want to be the kind of dad that they can really look up to. And not just because they see examples on the TV, but one of them is living at home with them. Gentlemen, can we pursue being those type of people? I would rather try and fail than not do it at all. I believe that God has great things to do in this county, but I know for me, sometimes I'm embarrassed by the fact that I'm just kind of waiting for God to do stuff. And here's the thing, and a lot of you know this, I believe that God has called us to be faithful for a time that we're in right now. Go Church, we are supposed to continue to be faithful. But I have to be careful. Don't confuse being faithful with being passive to what God has called every single one of us to do. I keep waiting for God to bring a bunch of people that don't know Jesus into this room. And I probably will keep praying about it because that's the way I've seen it be done before. But we need to take a step out there to go get them, because God has called us to be missionaries to this place. And a lot of them are still on their couches right now. And they're overwhelmed by different things, and they might have moments on their Father's Day where they've got people around them that tell them that they're special. But what happens tomorrow? What happens to the men of this county? Because believe it or not, the enemy has a plan for them. And so I don't want to let that be the only plan for the men in this county. And I believe if we would invest in the men, and not to be sexist, if we would invest in the male leadership of this county, I think things can change. I want to continue to do that for every person that we have opportunity to. You know why? Because Jesus told us to go and make disciples of all nations in whatever context that looks like. And so this is the desire of my heart. I know I can be unclear and all over the place a little bit, but this is the kind of dad I want to be. And so, gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the bacon and that you have a great day. But consider what kind of legacy you're going to leave for your kids. Consider what kind of man you're going to be, because I think that's the best Father's Day gift you could have, is that you would leave a legacy, that you would leave behind great faith for your family to see that. Because there are some things in life that you are going to lose, and there are some things in life that you can gain, and that is significance in the kingdom. Be the kind of men that your kids look up to. live the kind of life that God called you to give because Jesus died for you to do it. I hope you hear my heart on that. I hope that you understand that you've been given great opportunity. And there are 2 spots on the map for every single one of you. You've got a map at home, and you've got a map in this county. Figure out how to effectively do the gospel for both of them. And I'll meet you in the middle. Let's pray. We'll get to it. Father God, I love you so much. I thank you for a lot, yeah. I thank you that you did bridge the gap. Because I, like Rick, man, I wish. I think I could be so much more successful if he was in here. But, that's not going to stop me from trying anyway. And I'm so thankful for all the ways that you bridge the gap. That you show me what it means to be a man. You show me what it means to be a father and a pastor. And I'm so thankful for your example to me. I pray that I would never forget that. I pray that I would never leave, that I would continue to seek what you have for me because it's been a joy to be your son. And I'm so thankful that you called us into your family, that you adopted us into that and gave us all the rights of your son and equipped us with all that we needed to change the world. And you are amazed by your children. And I'm so thankful that we could have you. Help us to remember the relationship we get with you and not be deceived by the evil one to think that we're not worth anything. Help us choose to engage in the ways that we can and only we can, to not choose to be passive and kind of wait to see what's going to happen. God, thank you so much for the calling you have on the men in this church. Pray you would help us to continue to follow you wherever you lead, because you have not led us astray yet. And I don't think you have any plans on anything but greatness if we would continue to give everything we have to you. Father, please, I beg you, help every person that hears my voice to ask you what is the step they're supposed to take and boldly take it. I love you. I thank you. You are the best. And I'm so grateful, Father. Happy Father's Day to you. You've changed the world, and I'm so thankful for it. Happy Father's Day to the men that choose to continue to pursue you, and that all of us would come home to you and be in the perfect family, God. I love you, and I thank you, Father. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Amen.